Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. After nearly 4 years away, BTS is back, and the return is already sending waves across the global music scene. The group's new album, Arirang, sold nearly 4 million copies on its first day alone, once again underscoring the massive global reach of these superstars. On Saturday, BTS took over Gwanghwamun Square, the historic heart of Seoul, for a large-scale performance that drew tens of thousands of fans and was streamed live through Netflix to around 190 countries. This wasn't just another K-pop concert. The project, it places Korean identity in front and the center, from the album title Arirang to the sound of the Seongdeok Great Bell and stage visuals that blended modern pop with powerful Korean imagery. So tonight, we want to take a closer look at the comeback itself. And for this, we connect to Kyu-taek Lee, a Global Affairs Program Professor at the George Mason University, Korea. A big welcome, Professor.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. And also joining us is Megan Moon, K-pop researcher and PhD candidate at Adelaide University. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start the discussion first with Professor Lee. So like I've said, BTS is finally back with Arirang after 4 years away. How would you evaluate the overall significance of this comeback and what it says about BTS's global stature today?
Although it is said that this is their first comeback in 4 years, in terms of an album that truly reflects their own story, I think it is effectively their first in 6 years even, since their 2020 releases such as Map of the Soul 7 and The Bee. During that time, between 2020 and 2026, a lot of things have happened. As you know, BTS became the world's biggest boy band, achieving multiple Billboard #1 hits. And each member also released their solo albums that received both critical acclaim as well as strong commercial success. And of course, they have completed their military service, and all of them are now in their 30s. In that sense, this comeback is highly significant as it signals the beginning of a completely new chapter for BTS, which is clearly distinct from where they were in 2020. That is why audiences around the world are so eager to see what new side of BTS they will present this time.
Right, a very good way to put it, a new chapter for the boy band. Now, let's talk about the music itself first. So the album includes the lead track, Swim. Ms. Moon, how do you see the album's musical quality and popularity, and also compared to previous releases? What feels what's so special this time?
Yeah, so I think what really stands out about this album is it does have a shift to a more, I think, mature and kind of self-assured sound. So yeah, I think this really comes through with the title track Swim, which is a really interesting choice of title track, especially in the context of the full album. Also in the fact that it is entirely English. You know, we've seen that before, but I think a lot of fans were surprised with the sound and direction they went with Swim, myself included. You know, obviously it's got that very high production quality that we do expect from BTS, but I think the pacing of the song felt very deliberate, especially when fans like me were maybe expecting something a little bit more like Dynamite or Butter. So, you know, I think this, as Professor Lee maybe said, this is about their maturity, moving into their new chapter. They're not in the same place they were, you know, 4-6 years ago. Also, the rest of the album is also very different to Swim. And, you know, while it's clear that they maybe have pulled inspiration from some of their earlier stuff, I think it is a different sound for them, which I do think can be chalked up to this really interesting list of producers and contributors and collaborators that we're seeing on the track list. So I do think the biggest difference with this album is the fact that it doesn't feel like they're trying to break into the global market. They know it's there, and they're meeting that, you know, global audience on their own terms.
Right, definitely. So we're really seeing both familiarity and also some changes in their music as well. Now, another interesting point is the mix of Korean and global elements. The album highlights Korean themes, but Swim, like Miss Moon has said, is in English. Does that feel like a natural blend to you or more of a strategic move for the global market, Professor Lee?
Yes, I think it is very interesting because though the album is titled Arirang and emphasizes Korean elements, such as, just like Dr. Moon mentioned, as incorporating the sound of the King Seongdeok Great Bell in the song number 29, not only Swim, but actually this album itself actually contains a higher proportion of English lyrics even than any previous BTS albums, and features greater participation from international musicians, which makes it very globally appealing. So I think in that sense, though the music itself feels like back to basics when they did strong and powerful hip hop music in their earlier career, there is a noticeable sense of disconnect from BTS' previous approach, which placed strong emphasis on Korean lyrics and even led global fans to sing along in Korean. However, I think given the massive success of their English language singles such as Dynamite or Butter, as well as the strong performances of solo releases by members such as Jungkook, J-Hope, and Jimin, who also centered on English lyrics more, it ultimately seems to be a strategic choice aimed at a global audience having both Korean and global cultural elements.
Right, so this balance, it seemed to be the key of the appeal. Now, this album also brings in traditional elements, like I've said, Arirang, of course, the title itself, and the sound of the Seongdeok Great Bell. What do these elements add to the album's story and overall identity, Miss Moon?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one because since the album did come out on Friday, we've seen a lot of discourse online, with some people expressing, excitement about the cultural elements and others maybe expressing disappointment at the perceived lack of Koreanness, I guess, despite some of these links to traditional culture. And I don't want to speak on the execution of that, but I do think that these elements do add a sense of cultural depth to the album, because obviously they're not just decorative; they carry meaning. So despite how fans or critics are receiving the album and discussing how well it maybe represents Korea or Korean identity, you can't separate the traditional elements from these intrinsically, meaningful cultural significance. So, BTS have talked over and over and over again about representing Korea on the world stage. So I do think the things that we hear in the album, the bell, the Arirang sample that we hear at the end of that first track, they're very intentional. And again, yes, we keep coming back to this idea of it having a lot of English. So I think those two, like you said, there is a balance. They sit next to each other. And it's a balance between this global accessibility and these traditional elements that I think we're seeing in these albums, and the complex relationship they now have with being global superstars and also representative of Korean identity and culture.
Right, definitely. And just a couple days in, global fan reaction has been incredibly enthusiastic already. Ms. Moon, how do you think international fans are responding to these kinds of distinctly Korean elements?
Yeah, so global fans and, including those in Australia tend to respond really, really positively to these elements. So, they're seen as really unique and authentic and, even educational. So in my own research with Australian fans, I found many had very little familiarity with Korean language or culture, both traditional and pop culture before discovering K-pop. But through engaging with K-pop, they began learning Korean, researching cultural elements, and even traveling to Korea. So there is a real sense with global fans that these elements are not a barrier, and they're really a big part of the appeal. And so I do think BTS and K-pop do act as a kind of cultural bridge. Obviously, there's questions about how that journey happens if they do push themselves to learn a bit more, but I was seeing that in my research. And so I think we're also seeing that in this album, right? Fans who had never heard of Arirang or or some of these more traditional cultural elements of the album, going out and actually finding out what they are. And so I think that's a big part of this album.
Definitely. Now, we are also seeing a huge significance in terms of numbers. Arirang sold about 4 million copies on the first day alone. Professor Lee, what kind of impact could this kind of success have on the K-pop industry and the global music market as well?
As I mentioned just before, this comeback is very significant, not simply because it marks the release of a long-awaited new album from BTS, but because it represents a symbolic work that signals the beginning of a new chapter for them. For that reason, it was especially important for them, and starting off with strong commercial success likely eases a considerable amount of pressure that they may have. At the same time, I expect that the success of this album will help reinvigorate the K-pop industry, which recently appeared somewhat stagnant after its rapid growth within like 3 or 4 years. In fact, even people who previously had little interest in BTS or even K-pop in general tuned in to watch BTS Gwanghwamun live performance last Saturday. And some of those viewers may go on to purchase the new album from BTS or stream their music and may become new fans of both BTS and K-pop. This, in turn, is likely to have a positive impact on the K-pop industry overall, of course. And from a broader global music industry perspective, it could possibly further solidify K-pop's position as one of the major popular music genre worldwide.
Well, it really would be definitely a very important and helpful opportunity for the K-pop industry as a whole. Now, speaking of, the much-awaited comeback performance at the Gwanghwamun Square, the location itself is quite symbolic, I believe. Ms. Moon, how did choosing such kind of a location elevate the performance and the fan experience?
I mean, as a fan myself, I loved the performance. I thought, it was incredible. But I really do think that the location did, deepen the performance, perhaps turning it from more, just a concert or a performance that might have happened in a stadium into being a bit more of a cultural statement. So you could really see that from the very start of the performance, with the gate in the background. It was really integrated into the staging of the show, the cultural icons of Seoul, even what they weren't just a backdrop, but they were part of the show. And even in the wide shots as well, you could see the landmarks in the area, the statue of King Sejong and Isan-shin. These really situated the performance in a really significant and historical space. So again, I think this is coming back to what BTS are trying to have, this blend of Korean cultural heritage, significant parts of Korea, and culture, and again, at the heart of Seoul. And so, I think this really elevated the whole performance. I can only speak from a global fan perspective, but it really elevated the broadcast from something that might have just been, a very fun and impressive performance into something that was a cultural statement. And something I think is really important as well is the fact that it kind of blended pop culture, which is not usually associated with ideas of authenticity or cultural representation. And so, blending that with pop culture was really great to see, and really interesting.
The selection of that location definitely added a powerful layer to that. Now, we hear that around 40,000 people gathered for the event in Gwanghwamun. Professor Lee, from a cultural diplomacy perspective, how meaningful is a moment like that?
Of course, it is true that a large crowd from different parts of the world gathered in person to watch the performance from BTS in Gwanghwamun last Saturday. And we saw that it could be a very meaningful for Korea to invite them into this show. But also, I think what is even more important in this show is that the event was broadcast live to audiences around the world in real time. Although the broadcast did not fully capture the distinctive scenery of Gwanghwamun, Gyeongbok Palace, or the surrounding area as clearly as one might have expected, the performance nevertheless transmitted images of Gwanghwamun and its surroundings to a global audience who came to the event in person or who watched the show via Netflix. So in that sense, I believe that the event provided a meaningful opportunity to showcase contemporary Korea and Seoul in particular, which is a place where the past and present coexist in a very uniquely blended and dynamic way.
Right, it really helped a lot of people enjoy the concert itself wherever you are, and also whenever you are. Now, the streaming thing, we want to talk about that. Ms. Moon, do you think this kind of streaming through Netflix could become a new model for how global entertainment events could be delivered from now on?
Yeah, look, I absolutely think it sets a new benchmark for global music. You know, obviously there were many logistics that went on behind the scenes, but I really do think that something like this is huge. You know, we don't have the streaming figures yet, but I'm sure when Netflix releases them, they'll be insane. So, you know, I think it really does help to kind of get around limits of geography as well. So I think, you know, we did see early versions of this during the COVID pandemic, obviously when travel was, you know, shut down completely. But, you know, these online concerts or events, they were quite contained within specific fandom or, you know, company platforms. So, you know, I think the important thing that we're seeing here now is the scale of it. You know, and a platform like Netflix is huge. And so obviously we've seen things like the Netflix movie K-pop Demon Hunters. So obviously, you know, Netflix is across that. But with this new form of streaming, you know, simultaneously across so many countries, it really is just a further push of K-pop into the mainstream global media infrastructure. So I do think it's definitely setting a new benchmark. And like I said, it is absolutely raising expectations for accessibility, especially at a time when K-pop and any concert tickets are just insanely expensive. So I really do think it's going to be a game changer for people who can't get to them, like myself.
Right. Let's hope this kind of format could be benchmarked by many other live events globally moving forward. Now, finally, before we conclude our discussion tonight, like we've been talking about, BTS is putting Korean identity front and center with this latest album. What kind of ripple effect could that have on Korea's soft power going forward, Professor Lee?
For me, actually, I do not really favor describing the globalization of K-pop or K-culture in terms of soft power, because soft power, the concept is a little bit more suited to explaining how culture reinforces like political or economic power relationship, where the kind of culture exchange generated by K-pop does not operate in that way. That said, I do believe that BTS emphasis on Korean identity will have a significant impact on global audiences who are interested in K-pop, BTS, or general K-culture more broadly. Much of the discussion surrounding the performance has drawn global attention to places like Gwanghwamun, Gyeongbokgung, and Seoul, which may naturally lead to a growing interest in Korea's politics, society, culture, and history. So if BTS can be said to contribute to branding South Korea or its soft power, it would be through this kind of indirect but very active and voluntarily process.
Right, so it'll really be exciting to see how this comeback could shape the next chapter of BTS and Korean culture as well globally. Thank you so much for your insights tonight. We'll have to leave our discussion right here. I want to express my gratitude to Professor Lee first. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And Ms. Moon, of course, we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.